wonderful happened this morning at 9:30 Mass. Julie Coyne was speaking at all the Masses, and this morning we had our little ones sitting up here on the floor looking up at the screen, and they got to see all the little ones from Guatemala, including Julie's nephew Rico, who came down with her the last 10 days. And what I wanted those kids to understand is that many, many years ago, I won't tell exactly how many, Julie was pretty much in their place. She grew up in the parish and went through the total program that our teens are going through, and then went on to do wondrous things, absolutely miraculous things. And you can't watch the slides and see the joy on the faces of those children in Guatemala and not know that the Lord has been behind her the whole way. And I just want you to know that what Julie has done is a miracle. It's a miracle with lots of support. It's a miracle that she has pulled off because of her vision, her love, her compassion, her gifts. And so we're really, really blessed to have her part of our community. And as the first reading said, those who serve the Lord eat ears. Those who serve the Lord willingly eat ears. And Julie has served him for all these many years. And so we give you Julie Coyne.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Father Dave, for your generous introductions throughout this special weekend. Your faithful and passionate belief in our work is an inspiration to me. Thank you for the dedication to helping our program find the support to thrive. And thanks to all of you for welcoming me once again and sharing your Sunday Mass with me. It happens every year. The panic that comes over me when I contemplate trying to distill a year's worth of life in Guatemala in a way meaningful enough for you all to feel the impact that we are having on so many lives, so that you too can experience the fullness of spirit and the depth of gratitude that flows through our community every single day. But each year gets progressively larger in scope, and more happens in one afternoon than I can ever remember. I lose myself trying to sift through an entire year of emotions, all lumped together, as if staring at a tall stack of photos and trying to see them all individually. Slowly, it occurs to me to spread them out as though creating a collage. Even though you won't be able to see all the scenes laid out, something reassures me that each image touching the edge of another might inspire words to do the same. But how do you describe those moments when the ordinary suddenly becomes sacred? Time stops, the needle is ripped off the record player, and in the silence that follows, you witness the breakthrough of the divine that is always present but remains hidden to us when we fail to be attentive to it. So much of the essence of education and hope, the cracks of light shining through this work, arise in these moments. Singular glances of something much greater than we might perceive it to be. Just last week I was in Guatemala, and my last day in town was characteristic of the many times I must divide my attention again and again in order to attend to all those in need of my presence. On days like these, it's easy to fall into the hole of what is lacking, becoming keenly aware of all the places our support has not yet been able to reach. As a program, Education and Hope has had an impact on hundreds and hundreds of lives, and yet if I'm not careful to stay mindful, the focus on needs still to be met can obscure the view of all we've successfully created. Fortunately for me, the chaos was balanced by many moments of grace. At one point in the afternoon, Fernando came in to say that a mother new to the program overheard that I was in town. She was requesting a moment of my time to offer thanks. In the middle of trying to manage a dozen other things, I challenged myself to pause and collect my thoughts, to receive the mother's gratitude with sincerity of heart, the patience to be still enough to listen. Dressed in a faded and worn huipil that spoke to her economic situation before words could, the woman was someone I had never met. Her children came recommended by her sister because they had been in dire need of help. Wringing her hands, her slight frame shook a little as she spoke to me. She explained she was nervous, had no idea she would have had the opportunity to finally meet me, wondered how she would find the words to adequately express her gratitude. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she took a deep breath. Finally, the words spilled out. I had finally arrived at the conclusion that there was no way I could continue to support my children on my own. I found myself saying, I can't do it anymore. There's just no way. It can't be done. And then I found you, and the way appeared. A year of moments like these started on the first day of school back in January. Those of you familiar with our day-to-day in Guatemala know that waiting at the door for the elementary school kids to arrive at the after-school program is the highlight of my day. At 1 p.m., I stand at my post by the door, ready to greet each child with a hug and a kiss. It's important for me to make a big deal of their arrival, that they know I am waiting to welcome them in this way. I see it as an opportunity to acknowledge each child and remind them that they are loved, in the same way a parent might welcome a child's return home. This bit of ceremony has become ritual, and I know that the moments of joy we experience mean as much to me as they do to them. The best hugs ever are the ones I receive upon return after being away. What never fails to impress me is the way the kids line up eagerly and patiently to wait their turn for a hug. Every now and then one of the kids will linger so long in an embrace, it's as if you're experiencing an empty tank being refilled. I've started referring to these cues that trail up the street as love lines. After this joy-filled welcome on my first day back, the very last boy in the line was Wilson. New to our program in 2015, Wilson is 15 years old, a middle child in a severely impoverished family. He's extremely shy, and several afternoons a week, Wilson also works to support his family, so we don't see him as often as we do some of the other kids. Considering his timidity, I was very surprised when, after his hug, Wilson put his hands on my shoulders and made direct eye contact. Summoning the courage to speak, he trembled as he said, "You have no idea how happy it makes me to see you. Really, it fills my heart with such great joy that you're back." With that, his voice began to crack and he started to cry. You see, we're going through some very difficult times in my family, and things have been really, really hard lately. And I just feel so relieved to be back here with you now. My heart is just so full of happiness. In the past, I had struggled to coax more than a few sentences out of Wilson, not much more than his exquisitely polite hello, how are you, and goodbye. Now he was sobbing in my arms. I was so stunned by his emotional sharing that I began to cry and couldn't speak. All I could do was wrap myself around him and hug him tightly. When I regained composure, I reminded Wilson that we are his family too, that many of us are struggling in similar ways, and that I hoped our program might always be a place of comfort for him. I thanked him for trusting me enough to open up about his life at home. So that day, I made a mental note to learn more about Wilson's family, and recently we visited him at home. Wilson is the fourth child in a family of 7. All 9 people live in one small rented room with wood slats where there should be cinder block. There is no electricity and no indoor plumbing. Wilson told us that before he had the luxury of completing his homework at Education and Hope, he always tried to do his assignments before nightfall because working by dim candlelight was just too hard. Often the candles would drip wax on his pages and he would have to start all over again. His older siblings all dropped out of school a long time ago to contribute to the family income. Wilson also began working as a young child, coincidentally for a woman whose only son had graduated high school because of his scholarship with Education and Hope. She noticed how bright and determined Wilson was, so she offered to help him with the cost of elementary school. When he finally came to middle school, she asked that we award him a scholarship. Wilson's younger siblings are 9, 12, and 13, and yet they are only in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Despite their advanced ages, each is in danger of failing their grade this year again. Although he had been too embarrassed to discuss intimate details of his home life before our visit, Wilson now fretted openly about his younger siblings' futures. Where we live, people don't place much importance on education. When children fail grades, some parents just shrug and say, well, they're just not cut out for school. And when girls fail, it's even worse, because the idea is that they'll just be getting married soon anyway, so why waste the time and the effort? He says, I just don't understand this. We all have a right to an education. We all deserve to have access to the same opportunities. I'd like to see my brother and sister succeed in life as well. Upon first glance, it was obvious that his siblings were all suffering from malnutrition, but what surprised me was how clearly Wilson understood the connection between good nutrition and academic success. He knows they often go to school without breakfast, and they often go to bed without dinner as well, just as he did before joining us in 2015. Now that we better understand the situation, plans have been made for Wilson's siblings to join us at Education and Hope for meals and showers, and hopefully we will be able to get them up to speed on their studies despite all the time lost over the years. Back on the first day of school, my encounter with Wilson at the end of the hug line had my mind racing. It's striking how we all face personal challenges, and yet so many of us struggle in isolation because we're unable to see how connected we are with those around us. When I addressed the students and staff for our late afternoon meal, I alluded to an emotional conversation that had reminded me how many of us were navigating very difficult situations at home. How many of us often felt alone in these problems that seemed too big to bear. I ask that we join hands to offer a prayer for our community, that we might continue to find the strength and the ability to face our difficulties together. Recognizing that we share a common denominator of complicating challenges, I encourage us all to make a collective effort to show more compassion to one another, to look for the best in the people around us, knowing that they are probably struggling just as we are. These little shifts in perspective that might help to make the hard days less hard. We talked about focusing on the good, because no matter what might be lacking, there is always something to be grateful for. Eyes closed tight, everyone was really listening. I could feel the spirit of the room rise with the reminder that we are all inherently good, that we are all worthy of love and belonging. I looked out on the faces. Among those gathered were orphans, children whose home lives are weighted down by abuse, mental illness, and addiction, children who have been abandoned, teenagers struggling with depression. What we are able to offer in response to these serious situations is relatively simple: a clean, safe space, education and nutrition, loving, attentive care. And yet, our impact is transformative. What a blessing, this refuge that we have built together, a place for so many to set aside their burdens for a while they are nourished in body and mind, reminding one another that we're not alone in our loneliness. Although I struggle to wrap words around everything Education and Hope has come to mean, my 9-year-old nephew Nico is much more concise in summing it up. He says, Education and Hope is important because there are good meals and good teachers, and people are nice to each other and they have fun, and they're like a family because they get to celebrate birthdays together, and there is a lot of love. Nico was brave enough to accompany me to Guatemala 2 weeks ago, helping me to carry down 420 pounds of donated items for the kids. He got to experience up close what it's like when your heart lives in two places. While I would love to list the thousands of small acts of kindness that you make possible through your generous support, I hope that these glimpses into our work help to draw you a little bit closer inside our community, the community we're creating together. I'm thankful to you for allowing me to share with you these moments that remind us of our mutual connection, windows into these sacred spaces where we can truly see one another, where we can see our own reflection in the face of a neighbor. Here we realize how much more alike we are than different, and how the paths of our lives are truly intertwined. As we break down the illusion of separateness, we enter into the fullness of our shared humanity. We make way for compassion and forgiveness, despite our failings, despite our misgivings, allowing new space for the mysteries of mercy and grace to work within us. We remember that we belong to one another, and we reach out to care for each other in the love of the God who made us. The God who loves without measure and invites us to do the same. Thank you to Sharon Perez for reminding me of this wise mantra from our beloved priest, Father Joe Sullivan. You are mine, I am yours. We are always there for each other. Thank you for being there for the children of Guatemala. Thank you for being there for me. Thank you for the love that you share that is transforming the world. Thank you.